large financial institutions where they have a fiduciary responsibility to produce a profit for the owners of that money. But we still want that money to deploy. So we have to take the risk. You heard earlier about risk. You have to reduce the risk that an investor looks at and sees and says, I'm not going to do that deal because I don't see how I'm going to make any money. I'm not going to put my money on the line. And the way you can de-risk is by getting concessionary funding on the table through a number of things. Government can allocate some, or, and that's hard today, you don't find a lot of people putting the kind of the big money you need on the table, or you can get it through philanthropy. And philanthropists are willing to put up money. We're working with the Bezos Foundation, and we're working with the Rockefeller Foundation to help find some amount of money to help leverage. But in the end, we believe that a working marketplace where people are deciding voluntarily to buy a credit because that credit will allow them to temporarily, not forever, reduce their actual reduction if they need to. And there are some people who need to today. Let me give you an example. There are big companies that have reduced their emissions. They've done their scope 1, scope 2. They're getting down there. They got about 10, 15, 20% to go, but they can't get there. Just physically can't get there because there's no market yet sufficiently big for electric vehicles, or there's no capacity there yet for a smart grid, which would then reduce their emissions even more. So what do? Just quit and go home? No. If they could buy a credit, and that credit could be applied against, in our case, in the we have created something called the Energy Transition Accelerator. We announced it at Sharm el-Sheikh last year, and we are working with the new World Bank president now, Ajay Banga, to unlock additional billions in financing. And we recently launched the Blended Finance for Energy Transition Initiative to demonstrate how effectively public capital can leverage private investment. But carbon markets, we also think, has an important role to play here. And the market approaches first championed by the United States are now officially embraced by the UN process. Article 6 of the Paris Agreement says it lays the foundation for a high-integrity carbon market in line with the Paris Agreement. And to meet the Paris goal of keeping 1.5 degrees Celsius alive as a limit in the warming of the planet, I believe, and others believe, we need the carbon market more than ever. So I am really excited to see the enthusiasm that William was just talking about being shown in Africa for a carbon trading mechanism. With leadership from the African Carbon Markets Initiative, countries are positioning themselves to participate fully in a growing market, which will help to meet the climate and the development challenges at the same time. And I look forward to hearing over these 2 days about the progress ACMI is making. We also look forward to working together, we, the United States, with the ETA, want to work with the African Climate Market Initiative. But we think Africa can benefit and the Global South can benefit only if the carbon market grows. It's got to grow. You heard a mention of about 121 million. This market has to become a market in the billions in order to work effectively. And for that, we need to ensure the environmental integrity of this market. This is critical, not only to protect the climate, but also to create a thriving market, because people won't take the risk either of getting involved in a market that doesn't have the right standards and guidelines. So I hear again and again from CEOs, they're only interested in carbon credits if they are of the highest quality. And this has been a fundamental premise of multi-stakeholder forest carbon programs that we've supported, like the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility and the Biocarbon Fund Initiative for Sustainable Forest Landscapes. And African countries have been the leaders in verifying emissions reductions at a scale and generating credits. And the LEAF Coalition, many of you may be familiar with it, under which a number of African countries are eligible for these reductions. So my friends, at COP27, I joined with Raj Shah of the Rockefeller Foundation and Andrew Steer of the Bezos Earth Fund to introduce the Energy Transition Accelerator. And through this, we hope to leverage carbon markets to help accelerate the clean energy transition in developing countries. We are building a Paris-aligned program. That means a program that will try to keep faith with the 1.5-degree limit. And I'm proud to tell you that in the US today, with the combination of the IRA and our current rate of transition, we are seeing a major shift in the allocation of people's efforts in producing energy. 90% of our new energy is now coming from renewables, and we expect that to continue into the future. We are building a Paris-aligned effort across the board, and rather than crediting one project over here and another project over there, we're trying to build and reward a country for emission reductions that come about in the entire power sector. We want to be jurisdictional, not just project-oriented. And that could happen through the early retirement of coal, through accelerated deployment of renewables, new transmission or storage, or changes in government policy. And to anyone here who might say, well, wait a minute now, you know, someone's going to fudge this, or there's going to be a problem with it. Let me just be very clear to everybody. We want this credit to only be available to some company that wants to buy it if it is for the specific purpose of a project that reduces emissions, closing a coal-fired coal plant, or building out renewables. One or the other, or both. Now, for people who say, well, what about the holding it accountable? Folks, if you're closing a coal plant, it's pretty easy to see it happen and to know whether it's functioning or not. And if you're deploying renewables, you can see them with your naked eye. So I don't think this is something that's opening up a Pandora's box of abuse, and we're working very, very closely with a major group of people in order to try to make this happen. We believe we have a high-level consultative group, including more than 30 civil society, private sector, intergovernmental leaders, experts, stakeholders, all from Asia, Latin America, Europe, the United States, here in Africa. And we're honored to count Damilola Ogunbiyi among our closest advisors in that. And we're also being very careful to consult with VCMI, with SBTI, with all of the folks who've been pushing for this integrity in the process. We're speaking now to potential buyers of the credits, and we're hearing very strong interest. We are talking with countries that believe they could benefit from the ETA, and we're hearing interest, including here in Africa. So my friends, there are a lot of things to worry about in this context, but we stand on the brink of perhaps the greatest economic opportunity humans have known since the Industrial Revolution. That's where we are. We have an opportunity to create a whole new economy, clean energy economy, which is sustainable, virtually circular. We have an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of people who today don't have electricity or who suffer the problems of a drought that's gone on for 40 years. The worst drought in 40 years in Africa, gone on for 4 years, and it's making people move. They're moving today because of this. We have the opportunity here, and I'm beginning to see it. I believe we stand on the threshold of an amazingly exciting period of time. I'm seeing it. For the first time in this job, I'm seeing it every day at levels that are beginning to astonish me. What is happening with clean energy, what's happening in the deployment of wind turbines that now can get 20, 30 megawatts of power from one turbine, the amount of solar that's out there. We're going to see a reduction in the demand for fossil fuel as this happens, and I think that will be confirmed in the days ahead. So we're turning a corner. We're just not doing it fast enough or big enough. And our conviction is that the ETA provides us an opportunity with integrity to get concessionary funding that will then be used to make the transition happen faster. I'll close very quickly in a moment. Here's an example. In Sharm el-Sheikh, with a program called NUEFE, we worked with the government of Egypt. We brought $500 million of concessionary funding to the table. The government of Egypt said we will close 11 diesel, fossil fuel burning. But I read about families that are dismantling their homes to move. One person was quoted as saying, there's no water anymore. We're not able to live. People are slowly dying everywhere. We need to respond to this reality. And I believe that in this opportunity with the carbon market, it's one more tool. It's not the panacea, but it's one more tool to accelerate the deployment of the trillions of dollars we need to win this battle. And every single one of you knows, your children, your grandchildren, there are people all around this planet who are looking for us to behave like adults, do what the science is telling us we would do and need to do. Let's get this job done. Let's create every tool at our disposal to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Kerry, for those powerful remarks. And as an African myself, and not just somebody representing ACME, it gives me great pleasure to hear someone of your stature, your experience, and your passion speak about carbon credits in the manner that you did. And you called for the expansion of African carbon credits, and you positioned the carbon credit market as a potential new instrument for raising billions of dollars. That is music to the ears of every African policymaker, certainly every African Minister of Finance in the room. So let's give him a big round of applause. If you are a friend of Africa or an African, we really appreciate those strong remarks. So earlier I spoke about the fact that ACME is involved with different parts of the ecosystem that are required to build carbon credit markets. And Secretary Kerry has just talked about the one that is really, really critical, which is big, strong partnerships. And we look forward to working with the ETA. The next we're going to do is talk about the market of carbon credits and what is the potential of the carbon credit market. And I had talked earlier about an exciting announcement, so it does give me great pleasure to invite my sister and my friend, Damilola Ogunbiyi, Chief Executive Officer and Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All, to please come to the stage, accompanied by Hassan Ghazali, Finance and Investment Lead in the UAE Independent Climate Change Accelerators, and Martin Berg, Chief Executive Officer, Climate Asset Management. Please give them a round of applause as they approach the stage. Thank you so much.
A little bit shorter than William, so I have to move this down. Excellencies, honorable ministers, colleagues, it's really my pleasure to get us to this point where we're talking about an African-led carbon market. You know, I always want to bring it home, because when people hear about carbon markets, high integrity, market signals, they get a bit confused. But one of the facts that really, really stuck with me was that using fuel wood, even though it causes deforestation, is the 4th highest cause of death or mortality for an African woman today. I think it's important to bring that home. So clean cooking is not a nice to have. It is critical for the survival of African women. Every time women cook, they basically inhale the equivalent of packs of cigarettes, right? We've banned cigarettes, but we've allowed this to happen. What does the carbon market allow us to do? The market allows us to remove those harmful emissions from the environment, get a price for it, that these women can now afford clean cooking. It's really important for us to build it down to our context, because there's no country in Africa that doesn't have issues with access to clean cooking. But back to the agenda today. I think it's really critical for us to look at the efforts that have been made since COP28 in Egypt, and thank you, Mahmoud, you're here, in terms of the carbon market and the African carbon market. We have two major achievements and the announcements that William spoke about. And the two cornerstone efforts of the African Carbon Market Initiative is really looking at the demand side, something we call the Advanced Market Signal, also known as the AMS, and also the supply side, our efforts to unlock capital to carbon credit projects through financing de-risking mechanisms. So here we had focused on, and the spec, Kerry said it, high integrity, high quality. We want Africa to be seen as the location for high integrity projects. But we also know that this money is not a nice to have or a slush fund. It goes directly into development. And I think that's what is unique about the African carbon markets. When you're buying from here, you are helping a woman, you're helping a family, you're actually developing the continent. So without further ado, I would like to go to our first announcement today, which is one of our big announcements, and it's all about the the advanced market signals. I'm honored to introduce Mr. Hassan Ghazali from the UAE Independent Climate Change Accelerator, who has been a great supporter of our initiative so far, to take the floor on the announcement today.
Thank you all. Good afternoon. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here today and address you all, and also represent the UAE Independent Climate Change Accelerators. Under the leadership of Her Highness Sheikh Hashamma bin Sultan bin Khalifa Al Nahyan, we have established a coalition of market players who are working to develop the carbon markets in the UAE. Of course, the extent is not just the UAE, but also globally. The aspiration, raise awareness. The second aspiration is to actually aggregate demand. So that's where the ACME comes in. We are very pleased to have found synergies with ACME, and these we are capitalizing on. Therefore, I am very pleased to inform you all that the UICCA, as the Secretariat of the Carbon Alliance, has executed an LOI which makes a pledge to the Advanced Market Signal Initiative of ACME to the value of $450 million. Thank you. This, we believe, will start a virtuous cycle. Not only will it meet the demand of carbon credits from the UAE, but it will spur project developers here in Africa to develop high integrity, high quality carbon credits. Now, this does not all exist in a vacuum. Indeed, the LOI is signed. We are now working on a broader collaboration agreement with ACME, which is being finalized and should be announced in the days ahead. Thank you very much.
I think a market in Africa that was only 150 million, an announcement of 450 million deserves a much bigger round of applause. And thank you so much to the UAE Independent Climate Change Accelerator. So it just shows the true partnerships that we were talking about, and the fact that this and the ETA is truly inclusive and everyone can come in, as long as we all lead with the same principles of high integrity, full transparency of the entire process. It is now my other honor to lead to another announcement that's going to be made, and it pertains to setting the necessary precedents for the carbon financing space, building confidence across the market, and opening in a way that other investors can follow and now crowd in. So in this respect, I am delighted to hand over the floor to Martin Berg, the Chief Executive Officer of Climate Asset Management, for the next announcement.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here. We are one of the private sector participants of the Africa Carbon Market Initiative, and we are a specialist asset management firm that is exclusively dedicated to nature, or what we know as nature-based solutions. We actually emerged out of a partnership between HSBC, the global bank on the one hand side, and Pollination, specialist investment and advisory firm. Restoring nature and improving community self-worth, livelihoods, and biodiversity is what drives us at Climate Asset Management. And we are honored to contribute to scaling up the African climate markets and support the leadership role African governments take in this process. We see our role to catalyze demand from the voluntary carbon market, and we work with global companies that would like to buy high-quality carbon credits from around the world, but also from Africa. We fully agree with William that there's significant opportunities, particular for nature-related projects here in Africa, and therefore we are absolutely delighted to announce that we have already signed contracts for projects here in Africa that have the potential for an investment of $200 million in nature-based solutions in Africa by 2030. We're working in 6 countries, including here in Kenya, and we look forward to working with our partners, the Global Evergreening Alliance on the one hand side, and Soils for the Future on the other, to complete the ongoing implementation of our projects and thereby to contribute to Africa's potential to lead on high-quality carbon projects. Thank you very much.
So again, how fantastic. We've just made announcements over $650 million of investments. That's real money, and we really need the call to charge. The African project developers, the African businesses, the African leadership, and this is the reason for ACME to be truly inclusive. So if you want to know about anything, please contact us. We have guidebooks on how everybody can get involved, and thank you for having us for our quick announcements, and I'm going to hand back over to William. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, my sister Damilola, for those announcements. Sometimes some of these concepts can be quite intimidating, I guess. Advanced market signals, carbon credits, just energy transition. Let me put in perspective for you what we've just heard. Imagine that you wanted to start a business, and you were told that whatever you were going to produce in that business would be sold on day one to the tune of $650 million. How enthusiastic would you be to enter that business? I think we need to give these individuals a bigger round of applause for what will essentially be a signal that will indicate to our carbon credit developers that there is indeed demand for African carbon credits. And with the $200 million I talked about earlier, ACME is on its way to reach its goal of $1 billion in advanced market signals by COP28. So thank you so much for that effort. So as we continue talking about the different aspects of the carbon markets ecosystem, we now come to the market intermediaries. As I had talked about, we do need regulation. This is really critical to ensure that carbon credits produced in Africa are of the highest integrity, but also that the proceeds from these carbon credits are shared transparently and equitably, including the communities where the carbon credits are produced and the governments. So in this regard, we'll now move to a panel discussion around regulation. And we know that regulations can either constrain or enable a carbon market ecosystem, depending on how they are designed and implemented. And African countries have a strong incentive, especially after hearing those advanced market signals, announcements, to get their regulations right. By establishing regulations that are stable, predictable, and conducive to carbon markets, African countries can attract more investment, create more jobs, generate more income, and deliver more environmental and social benefits. Fortunately today, we have a distinguished panel of officials with experience in developing carbon market legislation and regulations, who will help us better understand the progress that ACME and the continent are making on addressing the challenges of regulation. I would like to invite to the stage Professor Yemi Osinbajo, the former Vice President of Nigeria and a current global advisor to the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. Joining Professor Osinbajo to the stage will be distinguished ministers from Mozambique, Ghana, and Rwanda, and my brother and friend, Professor Osinbajo, will introduce them in turn when he's here on stage. Professor Osinbajo, please give them a big round of applause as they approach the podium.
Thank you. Thank you very much, William, for the kind introduction. And good evening, everyone. And thank you very much for making the time to attend this short conversation. The topic is how to foster private sector investments in carbon markets while at the same time maintaining the integrity and equity of those markets. And of course, we've heard already several times today about the challenges that Africa has in meeting its climate finance needs. But while those challenges are there, we've also heard about the very significant opportunities that there are in carbon markets and how carbon markets can really be a game changer in the climate finance needs of Africa. And we've seen that the only way by which carbon markets can make that difference is if carbon markets are credible, if the regulations are right. And that is usually the place of governments. It's usually the place of the governments, and in this case, the governments of Africa. And we find, of course, that if governments are able to put in place the regulatory frameworks, the fiscal frameworks that would present credible markets, that would present opportunities for buyers and sellers to feel confident in the markets, we really can make a difference, which is really at the heart of the work of the ACMI, the African Carbon Markets Initiative. The African Carbon Markets Initiative works with governments to act for, to enable carbon market activation plans. So the whole point of ACME is to work with governments, work with institutional authorities to develop carbon market activation plans that would meet the requirements that we're talking about. And already, ACME has about 20 different African countries that we're working with. The furthest down the line is Kenya, and there are about 19 others. But in the next cohort, we're looking at about 6 or 7 countries, including some of those who are here today: Mozambique, Ghana, Rwanda, Nigeria, and the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. A lot of that work, a lot of the work that ACME will be doing with governments, of course, is largely dependent on the financing that we get. So we can always add to that number and do even more and work with more governments. This afternoon, I have the pleasure of having with me some of the ministers of countries that are shaping the way that their countries are developing their carbon markets, and they're doing, tremendous work. We'll have the opportunity to listen to 3 of them. I'm going to start with, I will introduce them first, and then I will start with the Honourable Minister from Ghana, but I'll introduce all 3 of them. So I'll start with the Honourable Minister for Lands and Environment, Mozambique. She's the Honourable Minister Ivete Maibazi. She's here. And next to her is the Honourable Minister for Energy from Ghana. He is the Honourable Minister Matthew Prempeh. And further up is the Honourable Minister for Environment of Rwanda. She is Honourable Minister Jean d'Arc Muja Maria. And all 3 of them are here. So I'll start with you, Matthew, Honourable Minister for Energy of Ghana. And I know Ghana is one of the frontier countries for carbon market regulation. And you're also doing a lot in terms of putting in place an infrastructure for activation of carbon markets. Just tell us in the 4 minutes that you have how far you've gone with all of that and what are the important milestones.
Thank you, Prof, for inviting me onto this panel a few minutes ago, right? And I guess I'm amongst ministers of environment and lands, and I'm a polluter as a minister of energy, so hearing from me probably is good. Ghana has done a lot, even though it's gone unrecognized in both the carbon markets and in carbon sequestration or lowering our carbon footprints, I say. Way back from 2000 and early 2000s, we changed all incandescent bulbs and outlawed it in Ghana and used in place compact fluorescent lights. And we have currently moved from compact fluorescent tubes to LED lamps. That change from incandescent to compact fluorescent saved about 124 megawatts of power, saving us a lot of carbon, over 6 million tons of carbon over that period. We haven't stopped there, even though unrecognized. We passed standards and labeling laws to regulate both lighting, air conditioning, and refrigeration. In fact, we went ahead and even banned used refrigerators and air conditioners from being dumped in our country. That saved us, over a period of 10 years, about 10 terawatts of energy, nearly over 6 million tons of carbon dioxide. That was about equivalent to about half of our energy generation in the year 2020 over that decade. So Ghana has been doing very well. We've also gone ahead and changed all our liquid burning diesel power plants to use gas. That's saving us a lot of carbon dioxide sequestration. But like I said, all these have gone very unrecognized. What we have also done is to set up the policy frameworks and the regulations to enter into the carbon market since the year 2015. What do I mean by that? We have also acceded to the Paris Climate Conference Article 6, bringing high integrity onto the board, because like I said, almost all what we have done have gone unrecognized. We have distributed over 1.5 million biomass cook stove. So sitting down and hearing high quality, high integrity, African market sensitizations and things like that, we see it's imperative for a country like Ghana to benefit from the carbon markets. We are not waiting, even though we will have to get it right. We didn't get recognized for all this because it is said you didn't put the documentation in before you even did those projects, so it doesn't count. So apart from the policies that we are doing, acceding to Articles 6, establishing a carbon registry, we've also gone ahead and collated a lot of experts. We need a lot of expertise around the world to help us in making sure the project preparation and documentation is well done, the monitoring is done critically well, and the verification of the carbon savings we are making because of these adjustments. Just last year, we passed 18 regulations to set the standards and labeling for electrical appliances in the country, from air conditions, from fans, from microwaves, cooking stoves, distribution transformers, a whole gamut of things to ensure that the environment in Ghana becomes less and less carbon free, and to also to ensure that we play according to the rules that we've all enjoyed to set up under the Paris Convention. So though Africa seems not to have gotten the promises either in mitigation or adaptations, we still feel that now the global crisis that is going on, we are feeling the floods, we are feeling the droughts, we are seeing the history, we've seen rivers in Ghana dry up. So we have to play our role, and we are playing our role. So we are, as joining the ACMI, we think that we have prepared the grounds enough for both the private sector, the corporates, the public to join, to establish more carbon markets in the country and let more participation come for further development and deepening of the carbon markets, not only in Ghana, but in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matthew. And it will surprise you to note that we're all inspired by the work that's going on in Ghana. It's not unnoticed. Certainly, it's very inspiring indeed. I'll turn over to Mozambique and Honorable Ivete Maibaze. I know that Mozambique is in the early stages of development of the carbon market regulations, the carbon market itself. But we're also aware that you're putting in place a lot of infrastructure for purposes of strengthening the carbon markets once launched. So do you want to tell us exactly where you're at and what the future looks like?
Thank you, Prof, for giving me the floor. I also like to take this opportunity to thank the government of Kenya for hosting this summit. Responding to your question, let me first starting by sharing that Mozambique, like most African countries, has had almost no role in contributing to climate change. Yet our country has significant potential in helping to address it. Mozambique has a major opportunities to increase carbon sinks through climate-smart agriculture, forestry, preservation, reforestation, and the blue economy. We also have large potential for emission reduction using renewable energy, low carbon transport development, and many others. Mozambique, like many African countries in Africa, has tremendous potential for generating carbon credits, mostly in the forestry, agriculture, renewable energy sectors, as well as in the blue economy. In this context, it is important to note that Mozambique already adopted a national regulation for REDD+ project in 2018, and then the country was the first country to issue the Transact REDD+ credits under the World Bank's Forest Carbon Partnership Facility. The last 2 years, the country has also seen significant increase in generation of carbon credits in other sectors, especially in energy and water sectors. To further tap into the carbon market potential, Mozambique became a member of the African Carbon Market earlier this 2023 initiative and has started the elaboration of a carbon market action plan. To facilitate and coordinate the work, an interministerial task force was established involving all relevant sectors, including the Minister of Finance, Energy, Agriculture, Transport, Industry, Water, and others. The task force has been meeting every 2 weeks since June, and together with the colleagues from ACMA, a launch event was organized with stakeholders from government, private sector, financial institutions, civil society, to start the work we will be undertaking with the ACMA. Currently, this task force is prioritizing the elaboration of a comprehensive regulatory framework. This regulatory framework will help ensure environmental integrity of our carbon projects, enable Mozambique to participate in international carbon markets under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, provide clarity to protect developers and carbon buyers, and most of all, ensure that our projects support and benefit local communities and the wider Mozambican population. It is expected that the first draft of the regulation will be available at the start of next year, with the final approval by our Council of Ministers in the first half of next year. As a final note, I would like to thank both ACM as well as our partners, including Tony Blair Institute, Belgium, and Sweden, for the productive collaboration we had so far and for creating platforms for interacting with other countries so that we can share lessons and experience and formulate common positions for our countries. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Mebazi, and congratulations on the Maputo launch. We heard that it was fantastic, 50 different organizations and project developers from Mozambique expressing their confidence in the developing carbon market there. Congratulations. So we'll go over to Rwanda, and Honorable Jean-Jacques Mujawa Maria, how is Rwanda positioning itself, positioning its carbon markets, and what does success look like in the coming months and years?
Your Excellencies, Ministers, Delegate, all protocol observed, good afternoon. Allow me to take this opportunity to thank the government of Kenya for hosting us in the first and monumental Africa Climate Summit and to the Africa Carbon Market Initiative for this platform to share about active carbon market participation in Africa and the world. Rwanda, as a nation, recognizes the urgency of taking bold action to mitigate climate change and build resilience, and we have made significant strides towards this. Rwanda also recognizes the importance of carbon markets in climate action. By actively participating in carbon markets, Rwanda aims to not only contribute to global efforts in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also leverage these markets to drive sustainable development and economic growth in Rwanda and in Africa. We are working toward enhancing the value of African carbon market through Africa carbon credits, and to achieve this, we will streamline carbon market procedures, provide technical support to project developers, and ensure robust capacity building at all levels. As some of you may know, we have developed a comprehensive national carbon market framework that provides a clear roadmap for the country's engagement in carbon markets. The framework outlines the policies, regulations, and institutional arrangements necessary for the effective functioning of carbon markets in Rwanda. To operationalize this framework, Rwanda has also established a robust carbon registry and manual of procedures. The carbon registry ensures transparency, credibility, and accountability in the trading of carbon credits, instilling confidence among investors and buyers. That's why regulation is a key for the seller to sell what he has or she has to the buyer. Rwanda also fully aligns with the Africa Carbon Markets Initiative's objectives and targets toward raising the value of African carbon credit. Sorry. We express our gratitude to the African Carbon Markets Initiatives for the support in the development of our carbon market activation plan. Success can happen only if together, all together, not in piecemeal, we can seize the opportunities presented by carbon markets to drive economic growth, create green jobs, and reduce global emissions. Rwanda is open to green investment. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think William, did you want to say something? Okay. I think we've heard just how much progress has been made in these three countries, and it's evident that so much has happened, and so much is planned, and so much is yet to happen. So since COP27, when ACME was launched, so much has happened, and we can see very clearly that there is a direction in which this is going. And ACME, of course, is determined to continue to do the work of working with governments to activate the carbon markets, their carbon market plans, and their carbon market initiatives. Already, as I've said, we have 20 countries that we're working with, and that is bound to increase as time goes on. We heard a few minutes ago about the advanced market signals that have been given. So far, about 650 billion, and the target is 1 billion. Of course, there's much more room for more, and we're looking forward to exceeding the 1 billion advanced market signals that we set for ourselves at the last COP. But I also want to mention that that ACME is launching a blueprint for carbon market activation plans, which blueprint was prepared by the USAID. And that blueprint is one that has taken into account a number of the very important issues around carbon market activation, especially some of the experience that we've gained in the past couple of years. And that launch will be very shortly. Also tomorrow, ACME will be holding a meeting, a roundtable meeting with ministers, African ministers who are present, between, I think it's at 7 o'clock in the morning, between 7 and 8. And we encourage you all to come for that roundtable meeting where we'll be able to drill a little deeper into what we can do to assist ourselves and to assist our countries as we move forward in activating our carbon market activation plans. So just to thank all our panelists, and I ask that you join me in thanking them with an energetic round of applause, though I know that everyone is a bit tired. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my brother and friend, Professor Simbajo, for chairing that very important panel. And I wish to thank our honorable ministers for their very positive remarks. It brings joy to my heart to hear how engaged governments who are so critical to this process, being so engaged in creating the right environment for carbon markets to grow in their countries. Three very different countries, and that truly represents the diversity with which we're dealing with on the continent. And to hear them talk about how they plan to convert potential carbon credits into value to reduce carbon is very heartwarming. Now we go to another important part of the carbon markets ecosystem, which is finance. We talked about market signals, we talked about market intermediaries, and now I would like to introduce Ariel Perez, Managing Partner at Vertri. Vertri provides integrated carbon solutions, including supporting and guiding clients on their journeys towards decarbonization and helping them navigate global carbon markets. Ariel is also a member of the ACME Steering Committee, along with me, and has been supporting the development of financial mechanisms with the objective of scaling financing for project developers and growing new and existing financing mechanisms. Ariel, welcome to the stage, and please introduce your panelists. Thank you so much. Please give them a round of applause as they come on stage. Ariel, can I just crave your indulgence? Please remain seated. I've been informed that one of our critical speakers, Ambassador Muhyiddin, is required at another session that he has to go to, and I'm just going to ask for a few minutes of your time to allow him to speak so that he can leave. Yes, now, so if you just remain seated, if that's okay. Ambassador Mahmoud Muhyiddin, please come to the stage. We understand that you have to leave, and of course, sessions are running late today, and so we do apologize for that. Please approach the stage and the podium and make your remarks. So please give him a round of applause as he comes. One of the things we were going to talk about today was the goals that ACME has for COP28, and we'll have the COP28 presidency speaking to us, but ACME was launched at COP27, of course, when Ambassador Muhyiddin was a high-level champion. Please give us your remarks. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure and honor to address you today, Excellencies, Commissioners, of course, the distinguished panelists that I was looking really for, listening to your inputs and wisdom to this important initiative. Of course, I have to recognize His Excellency Ambassador Maged, who is a true ambassador, I'm just being called ambassador. I'm just an envoy for the Secretary General of the UN and champion for COP27. I'm happy to serve as well COP28, but Ambassador Magid Al-Suwaidi, representing COP28, is with us here in the room. So I'll be brief, and I don't know what really happened to accelerate my intervention now, but let me just share with you some lessons and how the whole initiative came up. And each time, William, you speak with this update on we're using the slide on the partnerships, on the outcomes, on the involvement of accelerators. It reminds me of the early days, which were not really far. It was around August last year when the whole thing started. We're trying to address a challenge for those who are saying that Africa doesn't have a pipeline of bankable projects. And we met in Addis with the support of the African Union, the Regional Economic Commission, with the assistance and partnership of BCG and a number of investment banks, and of course the climate champions. And at the margins of the discussion on the pipeline of projects, another discussion came up about something called carbon markets and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, and why Africa doesn't have a carbon market. There are other important discussions on another innovative approach related to debt and debt swaps, which has another life of its own. So it went like that. August, we started to address the concept. After weeks of that, and I was refreshing my memory by discussing that with my good sister Bugulu, about what happened during the Climate Week in Gabon. May God bless its people and grant them peace and prosperity. That was during the Climate Week when we spent 2 days with potential partners, including the Sustainable Energy for All. I'm happy with the leadership of my sister Damilula here, and of course Rockefeller Foundation, in addition to the Global Energy Alliance for People and the Planet. Then a few weeks after, in November, in Sharm el-Sheikh, we launched ACME in the presence of the President of Kenya, President Ruto, with other heads of state, ministers, and private sector, of course, civil society. So the notion of putting that initiative on accelerator dynamics had been very much there from the very beginning. And I'm very happy to see accelerators coming from the UAE and from around the world. And I bet we'll hear more of support from the private sector and philanthropies finance to support this important initiative. Having said that, and I'll again try to be very brief, there are certain challenges related to divided opinions on carbon markets at large and fears of greenwashing by large corporate interests. There are different views in topics such as what the voluntary market should be used for, energy transition, nature protection, restoration, technology acceleration, or all of that. How high the integrity bar with the market should be set, as we heard from the previous panel. The role of compliance markets, the speed and the importance of regulatory developments and policy framework, and the role of VCM finance compared to other carbon financing tools. There is another way of looking at the importance of carbon markets today, which is coming through what's called the CBAM, the cross-border adjustment mechanism. And if we are not prepared adequately in dealing with this new challenge on trade, we stand to lose a lot as exporters, for instance, to Europe. And one could think of decarbonizing the hard-to-abate sector. Another way of dealing with it is to challenge the whole thing through the WTO. Others may consider reciprocity, but we consider carbon markets, including ACME, a good way to capture the value at home rather than sacrificing it elsewhere. 6 specific suggestions, and I think at this stage could be just more of points of emphasis. First, quality and integrity, and with avoidance credit for Africa, we need to strip out cheap, low-integrity credits that undermine good actors and build sustainable, active market in the long term. Second, is the right methodologies tailored for the needs for Africa, especially when it comes to impact on the socio-economic system, biodiversity and nature, and capturing the value, especially when it comes to nature. Third, scaling investment for African projects, as we need to secure more investments for African carbon projects and leveraging a range of funding sources and models. Then the fourth area, which had been tackled nice in the previous panel, about the incentive structure, regulatory framework, and policy. Here is not just about the market, it's about the market, the policy making, regulatory incentives, and of course, the role of society and those who are bringing data systems and monitoring progress for transparency. The fifth is basically about the global market access, and let's remember that voluntary carbon markets only represent a small fraction of global traded value, and there should be a consideration from now on for compliance markets at the real price. And more of that will be getting more of when we meet at the COP in Dubai. And finally, we need to advocate on the global stage for African carbon projects, both in voluntary and compliance context, to be seen as best in class for quality, integrity, and benefit for delivering for the people and for communities in Africa and beyond. Having said that, I look forward to more progress. I look forward to another update from Asiko and Mr. Asiko and his team for the progress, not just in efforts and progress in partnerships, but for the final outcomes and impact. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. I have the pleasure of moderating this panel, and I'm part of the steering committee of ACME. We've been tasked with identifying and creating new financial mechanisms that could unlock finance, which essentially will leverage on all of the ambition and momentum that we've seen in carbon markets over the last couple of years. Bit of background on myself. I'm the managing partner of Vertry. Vertry is an integrated carbon solutions platform that works with governments, institutions, corporates, and project developers, really that take ideas and projects really from cradle to the grave, so very early stage all the way into the commercialization, trading, and retirement of these instruments. We want to talk a little bit about the progress that we've made today, and I have the honor of introducing my co-panelists. So first, Dr. Andrew Steer, who's the president and CEO of the Bezos Earth Fund. Angela Churi-Kalhagi, who's the executive vice president of Impact for the Environmental Defense Fund. And Lamin Manjang, who is the vice chairman for Africa for Standard Chartered. So as a practitioner working working in Vertry in these markets, I think we've long been facing some of the bottlenecks that we've heard about today. Speaking firsthand, when we talk about risk and a bottleneck, we absolutely need to get to the point where we're not just identifying and measuring risks, but actually creating mechanisms that can address them and unlock the flow of finance which is required. So I'm going to start off by handing over to Dr. Andrew Steer, and we'll talk about some of the work that they've done on the Bezos Earth Fund and why that's such a critical part of the agenda for his organization.
Great, thank you, Ariel. What an encouraging meeting this is. Thank you, William. Thank you, John Kerry. Thank you, three amazing ministers who laid out exactly their vision for carbon markets. It's worth remembering that we've been here before, and it's worth asking the question, why are carbon markets in Africa not bigger than they are? I actually had the privilege 28 years ago to oversee the development of the pilot carbon markets at the World Bank. And indeed, in this room, Ken Newcomb is here, who oversaw and led that effort. Hugely successful, a flowering of companies and investments. And then, do you remember, we led into the COP in Bali, and we talked about RED+. That was COP 13, I think, and we're now COP 28. We had huge expectations about billions of dollars flowing in to address the needs to reduce carbon. What happened? Why did we fail? Well, first, the demand for carbon credits wasn't really there. Corporations and others that should have been supplying funds had very little incentive, so the price fell down. Secondly, we realized that a lot of these companies were actually buying carbon credits not in an honorable way, but in order to avoid doing what they ought to be doing within their own factories and so on. Third, on the supply side, the quality actually was highly mixed. We didn't monitor very well. There was all kind of duplication. There was leakage. And so over the years, the enthusiasm just flagged. And we had a dreadful lost decade. So the question is this different? And I think the answer is yes. And that's why we at the Bezos Earth Fund are the biggest funder, I believe, of the standard-setting organizations. We're a founding member of GIAP, which is totally committed, as we've heard today, to ACME. And we co-started, as John Kerry said today, the Energy Transition Accelerator. We believe very genuinely that this offers an opportunity for all countries, but Africa in particular deserves a much bigger piece of any pie. It is simply not right that Africa should have 40% of the solar capacity in the world and only 2% of the installed solar energy. It is not right that in rich countries, 81% of investment in renewable energy is a private sector investment, whilst in Africa and the developing world, it's only 14%. We need to use carbon markets to focus on people, and I think there's a really encouraging sign. Number one, the supply of money is higher. Corporations, whether in rich countries or in developing and emerging countries, are now getting it. They are willing to engage. They are also getting the fact that they cannot get a cheap way out of what they need to be doing themselves. Second, the supply is becoming much higher quality. We've learned how to do it right, and we now can actually measure impact. Satellites can show virtually every tree falling and every tree growing. They can also show methane emissions. We now can actually track carbon emissions very accurately, so we know when things aren't going very well. Most important of all now, I think we've understood that this is about people. In the early days, it was tons of carbon. Yes, tons of carbon matter, but what matters even more is livelihoods. And as several speakers have said today, how extremely cool it is that we could be investing carbon money to actually double farmers' incomes. Carbon is too valuable to leave up there in the atmosphere. We need it down here in the form of trees and bushes and crops and soils, where instead of death, it brings life and vitality. It brings resilience. It can help growth. And what's true for the rural environment is true for energy as well. We ought to be using carbon markets to bring renewable energy, clean energy, to reduce pollution, to improve health, and so on. That's why we believe in it, and that's why we set up the Energy Transitions Accelerator, and we're looking for parties that would be interested in being co-investors in this. And we love what's been said today about ACME, Africa's carbon markets, driven by African for African citizens. So thank you very much.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. I think at this stage, we want to talk about a little bit about some of the actual mechanisms that we've identified within ACME. We're going to go into detail on two specific ones. These bottlenecks, whoever's in control, that you wouldn't mind changing the slide. Thank you. So one of the main ones that we heard about today, which really I think has had a watershed moment, is obviously an advanced market commitment or advanced market signal. It's important, obviously, to know that the money is there on the other side, but now it's actually getting into the details of what that money is for, how many credits does that represent, what is required in order to, to achieve the payments, for example, and it becomes extremely complex. It would be great if we can have, as Secretary Kerry had alluded to, a global market with a single price. But the reality is, we're going to have several markets. Some are regional, some will be international, some will be obligatory, and some of it will be voluntary. And because you have such a wide array of different kind of eligibility criteria and different considerations from an investment perspective, we really wanted to attack this head on by going to one of the main bottlenecks that we've heard about within ACMI, which is kind of perceived or real political risk. And I would say it's not just political risk, it's really regulatory risk more than anything else. So the need for deployment early stage, needing to come into the market very quickly. Clearly, there are pools of capital in the private sector that are well suited for that. But the markets themselves are not that well established so that that investment can be de-risked later on in the project life cycle, as you see in other asset classes. So Virtually views carbon as a new asset class. And one of the ways that we're working to really kind of move the chains is by creating a government-sponsored platform, working government by government, starting at the end, understanding what it is that they're trying to achieve from a revenue maximization standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, what sort of specific, let's call it technical aspects in terms of project design and methodological design are important to them. And then with government support through a series of binding agreements, we can be very agnostic into how we invest into projects, how those projects are then run, and really kind of most importantly, I would say, is what the commercialization model is for those projects at the end, because it's clear that fixed prices for 20 years are fit for purpose for some projects, but certainly not for others. And ultimately, governments have that right and will always retain that right, so they also have to have the flexibility. So one of the things that we're doing is trying to be as agnostic as possible, working with governments bilaterally on a sponsored basis, and then having that platform open the doors to other developers who have obviously relationships, experience on the ground, have been in communities for decades, and then adding value where we can along the value chain and across the project life cycle. But most importantly, it's always being aligned with governments, right? We have no interest, and I think most people in the market really have no interest in locking up deals that don't stand the test of time because interests are inherently not going to be aligned. So ACME has really been incredibly effective at bringing all of those stakeholders to the table and moving the dialogue in helping governments, helping investors, emitters, different stakeholders that are key to this market to try to kind of understand where we want to get to, and then creating mechanisms borrowed from traditional finance that absolutely can address some of those concerns and brings those projects to market. One of the most successful ones has been a voluntary carbon market linked swap, which Standard Chartered has pioneered. And next, I'd like to hand it over. To Lamine Majan, who can talk about some of the work they're doing within Standard Chartered.
Thank you very much, Ariel. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Standard Chartered Bank is a leading international bank in the forefront of the drive to accelerate climate finance. We want to drive impact primarily in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, because this is where our presence is, and this is also the region where the impact of climate change is more severe and the regions that are least prepared for it. As a bank, we are preparing to mobilize $300 billion by the year 2030 in terms of sustainable finance. And so far, as of 2021, we have been able to mobilize about $48 billion. Now, carbon pricing through carbon emissions trading is a primary mechanism for capital allocation and emissions reduction. Implementing carbon pricing to ensure that the polluter pays is a widely accepted driver of net zero reduction transition. Voluntary carbon markets allow for companies to voluntarily fund nature or technology projects. Now, the voluntary carbon market has existed for several years, but I would say it is fragmented, it lacks standardization, and there have been issues of reputation as well, which I think Dr. Andrew has mentioned. Our group CEO for Standard Chartered Bank, Bill Winters, chaired a task force on scaling voluntary carbon markets. This task force led to the formation of the Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Markets. There's an independent advisory board that supervises the market for carbon credits based on the application of core carbon principles, which aims to ensure that carbon credits are robust. Now, one of the initiatives that Standard Chartered Bank is working on in Africa is with a company called Cocoa Networks, a technology platform that aims to protect tropical forests and transform lives. They operate renewable fuel utilities that retail clean cooking fuel as a low-cost alternative to charcoal and firewood. The UN Special Envoy that spoke just now mentioned about the harmful effects of firewood and charcoal on the environment, but even more deadly is the impact that it has on the lives of the women. Africa carbon market developers face high cost of capital, mainly due to the relatively high risk associated with project development. Of course, we can argue whether it's real risk or perceived risk, but there is risk. Now, there are multiple financing instruments that could be mobilized to unlock African carbon market potential, such as blended financing, which leverages development finance to reduce the cost of capital. Standard Chartered Bank is working with ACMI and the World Bank to develop financing structures that support many of the carbon reduction projects across technologies, geographies, and sectors, including clean cooking and nature-based solutions. In conclusion, I will say that robust carbon markets in Africa will not only align with the ESG goals, but also catalyze substantial investments, fostering a virtuous cycle of sustainable growth and environmental impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Lamine. Appreciate those comments and really for your leadership in this space for yourself and that of Standard Chartered. Next, I'd like to hand over to Angela, and want to hear a little bit just from a personal perspective as well as your work in EDF, what this market means to you and the potential that you see that it can have for Africa.
Thank you very much, Ariel, and good afternoon. It's indeed a pleasure to be here as part of this, what I would say, a historical moment in having this conference in my hometown and seeing the great turnout. First of all, EDF is a global nonprofit organization that works at the intersection of policy, science, and economics to address the greatest challenge that's facing us, that's climate change. So we strive to understand the challenge, to define and advocate for solutions that are people-centered, and we do this in partnership with peers across different sectors and across different regions. We work with indigenous peoples, groups, we work with government, we work with corporate players and investors, all of whom we believe are absolutely critical to being able to advance action on climate change. Turning to the subject at hand, and I think anybody who's, I think virtually every African gets to hear through their life that if you don't know your past, you do not know where you're going. And it's the same thing with carbon markets. And while Africa has had a past of limitations in terms of inadequate access to the market, in some cases, some not very good experiences with the kind of projects that have been put forward, the numbers that William put up, there is a story behind each of those numbers. And I think it's important to also look at the other side of the experience that Africa has had. We have projects such as the work KenGen has done. And I don't know how many people know KenGen, but as the power generating utility in this country, they have generated close to 5 million credits for large-scale projects, the kind of projects that we believe could be scaled up through things like the Energy Transition Accelerator, through ACME. We have the wind power farms in northern Kenya. We have the concentrated solar power in North Africa. We have some great examples of what good looks like and what it is we need to be replicating and scaling up. Of course, to do this, we then need to think about where do we need to accelerate the action. One relates to capacity. I think a big problem we have here, and I'm really excited that ACME is looking into this issue, is that it's not that we lack capacity on this continent, but much of our capacity is either misplaced because there's no demand for that set of skills, so people go off and do something else, or it's displaced. We go and seek that expertise elsewhere. We need to find a way to tap into that capacity, however little it is, and institutionalize this. And I was very encouraged to hear that there are conversations around working with the African universities to start scaling up and pushing out the expertise that's going to be needed to implement the markets at scale. Now, the carbon market is not just about decarbonization, it's about investment, it's about accountability, it's about inclusion, it's about putting in place a whole range of systems that are part of the heart and soul of climate action. And therefore, I think the effort that's been made through ACME should not be seen as something on the side, as just relating to that thing called carbon markets, but is an integral part of how we're going to transform the societies by strengthening and enhancing those institutional capacities to monitor, to follow, to engage, and to make partners of all the relevant stakeholders, not in a passive way, but as active participants in owning the process. I want to end with just two short points, since I see the clock's running, and I could probably speak all day on this. One relates to price. And I hear quite often when I talk to people about this is that the price for African credits is low. And part of this is, one, because of the type of projects, where they're held, but also by the long-held and persistent perception of risk. And sometimes this is not rightly so. And that's why we need to start telling the stories of these small successes, because this is what's going to show people that it is possible to accelerate these efforts. So to get to where we want to go, I think we need to move fast to change the narrative for Africa. The best way to do it is to start implementing those projects, to start bringing the beneficiary story, and start crowding in those stakeholders. And as the Environmental Defense Fund, we are ready to continue working with partners across this region and across different sectors. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. And just to, so we're out of time for our panel. So I want to thank all of the panelists. I want to thank all of you for listening today. And I will hand it over to William, who will introduce the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful panel. Things are running late today, and we do apologize. Please give a round of applause to what was a very distinguished panel as they resume their seats. Thank you so much, Andrew, Lamine, Angela, and Ariel, for those important points. As we've been talking all along, all these different pieces need to work together in order for carbon markets to develop at the ambition and the scale that we want to. Now, ACME was literally born at COP27. And at COP27, ACME made a number of promises. what you have been hearing throughout this session today is how ACME has been keeping those promises. And when we were launched at COP27, we had a goal that every promise that we made at COP27 would be achieved at COP28. And I'm really glad that you've all had a chance to hear that. And then we have a very important speaker, and I do thank him for his patience and for his humility in waiting, because obviously he's an incredibly busy person. And this is none other than Ambassador, His Excellency, Ambassador Majid, who is the director of COP28. Please give him a round of applause as he approaches the stage and gives us his remarks as we close.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. It's always difficult to close out after so many expert speakers, those who've made such a difference in the carbon markets world, and I hope I'll do my best to keep up with the expertise that we've seen today and the wonderful people who've contributed to this process. Excellencies, colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this discussion. The COP28 presidency firmly believes that carbon markets, voluntary carbon markets, are an important, as yet underutilized tool in delivering climate action. With only 7 years remaining to rein in emissions and keep 1.5 within reach, we need every tool at our disposal. Our goal here must be to resolve the issues that are holding us back and from using all the tools in our toolbox. VCMs, which span both the energy transition and climate finance, are an important part of the COP28 action agenda. VCMs can contribute to climate mitigation by disincentivizing actions that would otherwise lead to higher emissions, or by incentivizing those that reduce emissions. Examples of this include reduced deforestation, supporting the transition to more efficient cook stoves, or facilitating the uptake of clean energy technologies. It also includes efforts to boost the removal or sequestration of CO2 through reforestation, incentives to foster the protection and expansion of ecosystems, or through direct air capture. According to the IPCC, VCMs could play a major role in funding the removal of 3 to 4 gigatons of global emissions by 2030. Aside from mitigation, VCMs can also drive important environmental, social, and economic co-benefits. This includes protecting biodiversity, improving soil and water, and boosting jobs and livelihoods for local communities. On the finance side, credible and high-integrity carbon markets can help mobilize flows of cross-border financing, particularly to the Global South. There's also complementarity between VCMs and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, with clear opportunities to harmonize country and corporate level financing. However, to achieve their potential, we must first reconcile the reality that in their current form, carbon markets face a crisis of confidence. A lack of unified, commonly agreed standard is undermining their integrity and diminishing their value. Our primary objective must be to restore confidence in carbon markets and to ensure that the highest integrity standards are firmly in place and actively implemented. On this point, allow me to recognize the role of the African Carbon Markets Initiative, ACMI, together with African governments, for the leadership in establishing regulatory environments that are conducive to private investments. And this is only a fraction of what is possible. The carbon market opportunity in Africa is significantly under-realized, with less than 2/3 of Africa's credits coming from only 5 countries, and with almost all projects focused on just 2 sectors, energy and forestry land use. This leaves significant room for growth. If developed with a focus on integrity and credibility, VCMs could boost critical climate finance and support green growth and development. This can help deliver multitudes of climate action across a range of sectors, including adaptation, decarbonization, biodiversity protection, and more. The COP28 presidency welcomes the continued efforts by ACMI and partners to develop and scale up high-integrity carbon projects. And we support the ambitious goals of the ACMI to raise the quality and integrity of African credits and mobilize up to $6 billion annually by 2030 and $120 billion by 2050. Colleagues, the sheer scope and scale of the climate challenge is such that we need trillions, not billions. And the reality is that none of us can foot such a bill alone. We need every dollar working towards a low-carbon, climate-resilient future that we all aspire to. Voluntary carbon markets are an important piece of this puzzle and have the potential to unlock otherwise untapped resources. We need to work together to scale up high-integrity carbon markets, including more carbon market activation plans at a national level. We need to foster closer collaboration with private sector partners and encourage investment in high-quality transactions, particularly those that prioritize the participation of local communities. And we need to continue to align VCM integrity efforts with those to operationalize Article 6 to ensure synergies of public and private investments. By uniting your expertise, resources, and influence, we can establish, implement, and deploy a framework that ensures integrity, transparency, credibility, and accountability for voluntary carbon markets. By harmonizing efforts, acting in unity, and focusing on integrity, the potential of this tool can be realized. And this will bring us closer to our ultimate goal of delivering transformative progress against the Paris Agreement. Excellencies, colleagues, friends, the COP28 presidency appreciates the efforts of the African Climate Markets Initiative and its partners in furthering this discussion. We look forward to further outcomes to help drive integrity in VCMs, and we look forward to working with each of you to push forward this process and to help bring this unique and potential game-changing resource to fruition. Thank you so much.
I would really like for us to appreciate the remarks of His Excellency Ambassador Majid Al-Suwaidi, not just because he is representing what will be possibly the biggest COP ever, but also for his strong endorsement of the African Carbon Markets Initiative, but most importantly for his humility and patience in waiting for us in what has been a delayed session. Please give him another round of applause and appreciate him. So this brings us to the close of our session. I want to thank all of you for sitting through this. We have heard everything that needs to work, needs to be gotten right in order for carbon markets to work at the scale and ambition that we would like them. I would like to thank all our distinguished panelists, speakers, all those working in the background to make this successful, and all of those who have helped to spread the message of the African Carbon Markets Initiative. I assure you that this is a worthy cause for Africa, and I assure you that this will be successful this time around, Andrew. I heard your remarks loud and clear. This time it will be successful because we've got all the actors in the room and we're all working towards the same goal. Thank you very much for an excellent session, and may you have a pleasant rest of your summit. Thank you.
Today was the inaugural Africa Climate Summit here in Nairobi, and there have been very important discussions going on. Just this time we've been talking about carbon markets in the global south, and what speakers are reminding us is that we would almost miss the opportunity to take advantage of green financing through carbon markets if we don't take a clear position as a continent to utilize the opportunity. For instance, Africa is known to have vast areas of green, vast areas of virgin land, vast areas of plantations. All these are absorbing carbon dioxide. Actually, a carbon market is one that utilizes the stocks that we are absorbing in Africa. Now, what has been happening is while Africa is providing this opportunity to absorb carbon dioxide, we are not able to get any financial benefit from this particular matter that we are dealing with and what we are helping the globe to deal with carbon dioxide emissions. So towards the end, the Director General of the COP28 has just reminded us that countries that right now are the biggest producers of fossil fuels are now ready to finance the carbon market. But the constraint that is existing is that Africa still lacks the capacity to come up with proper proposals that then take advantage of these particular markets. Now, Ambassador Majid Al-Suwaidi, the Director General of COP28, is reminding Africa to take this opportunity and make use of it. The United Arab Emirates has already pledged $450 million to the carbon market so that it provides the funds that will be able then to have African countries utilize the carbon market and buy the credits. Another issue that has really come up at the meeting here is that Africa is enthusiastic about carbon credits. Unfortunately, the capacity is to determine how much of the carbon stocks that Africa is actually holding is one of the issues that now need to be done. We need to come up with a proper way to actually accumulate measure these stocks so that then they can be translated into the many dollars that are now on the carbon market exchange. Earlier on, His Excellency, the President, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, reminded the African continent to stop looking at who has polluted more and who needs to pollute. He said that we must now start looking at a paradigm shift on this issue so that we look at climate change as an existential threat on human survival, and therefore there is the need to now start tackling climate change from a global scale and to utilize the opportunities that are available in climate change to make use of them for the benefit of humanity instead of looking at who has polluted more and who needs to pollute more. The president looked at the issue of our arable land, the opportunities in agriculture, and what we can actually do to ensure that we have sustainable agricultural systems that do not pollute, but instead participate in the global stocks market, global carbon stocks market. And he reminded African states that the resources on the African continent are sufficient to then finance any programs that are available on the climate change front. For instance, Africa right now is the main source of minerals like nickel, like lithium, like cobalt. All these minerals are used in the making of batteries that are used in electric motor vehicles and electric motorcycles. Now, what the President, His Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto, is reminding the global community that if these minerals are turned into final products, then Africa has sufficient resources to run her programs on climate change. And now what he wants is the global community to start looking at Africa as an equal partner and not one that requires assistance, but one that is ready to work with everybody else to tackle the climate change debacle. The President at the same time reminded that indigenous communities, most of who are found in Africa, hold some of the very virgin areas of land that are also contributing towards absorption of carbon dioxide. So some of these areas are areas that should be seen in terms of their value and not just open spaces. From the Kenyatta International Conference Center at the Africa Climate Summit, I'm Judith Akolo, back to you in studio.
Tangamano wetu wafurahisha, umoja wetu sote wa